According to Henry Ford, all history is bunk. Others say that we should never look back, but as each of us provides his own history, or when the future looks short and bleak, what do we use as points of reference? Memories, even when they may be unpleasant, have their value, but some are more than just fleeting thoughts and become part of life itself. The beginnings of Greenwood, Nova Scotia as a Royal Air Force airbase have been documented by some to February 1942. But from my point of view, the true date of official establishment of No. 36 Operational Training Unit was Tuesday, March 10th, the day after the arrival of about 500 officers and men from the SS Orbita. In naval terms, the 12 days crossing to Halifax was uneventful, in that the Atlantic weather had helped keep the U-boats off target from the 2 destroyers and the 2 ancient troopships of the convoy, even though the average speed of only 8 knots must have caused some anxiety and discomfort to the escorts. Never was kit more hastily assembled at roll call as each man clumped down the gangway across the wooden wharf to a waiting troop train. Little could be seen of Halifax through the falling sleet and the steamed-up window carriages as for the first time in days one began to feel warm again. Speed increased through the murky day with endless woodlands, frozen lakes, and tiny halts as we dozed to Kingston and a full stop. The road away from the town was in partial thaw, and the traffic of military and other vehicles had produced a fine set of ruts filled deceptively with a foot of gooey, sandy mud. The road turned and we eventually arrived at the guardroom near the main gate. As the sun set, we picked up our kit and filed into barrack rooms. What a sight greeted us inside! Clean barracks with shellac stripwood floors, double-tiered metal bunks with mattresses and sheets as well as soft gray blankets. The washrooms looked magnificent and were quickly put to use with the first hot water in nearly a fortnight. Word got around that there would be a meal at 5:30 and the queue had formed outside the cookhouse well before that time. Boots may have still been sodden and men's clothes still damp, but such facts no longer mattered. There was to be food. When it was collected, it may not have amounted to much. RAF cooks had seen to that. But still, the bread was white, not gray, with a block of butter in the middle of the table. The next day was spent in parades, roll calls, and reallocation to barracks mainly by trades or groups. The officers already had a small mess operating, and the senior NCOs had half a barrack block to themselves. Things began to get sorted out. Once the Hudson courses had settled down to a steady routine and the technical support was fully functional, leave rosters were set out and many, if not most, made a beeline to the United States. The most favored journey was across the bay and then by coach or rudimentary rail travel through Maine to Boston and on to New York City. Travelers accustomed to the purchase of a small piece of cardboard to take them from land's beginning to land's end were fascinated by the sheer length and perforated aspects of rail tickets from Kingston, which included transfers in Digby, St. John, and Boston. It was not thought so amusing, however, to be awakened in the middle of the night at each stop in New England for a portion to be detached or inspected. Married men were by this time most notably given over to the Greenwood stare. With this affliction, the person adopted a lost, faraway look, and his movements, usually as the queue slowly wound around the cookhouse wall, became completely automatic. This was partially because incoming mail was delivered to the barrack rooms by lunchtime, and partially to the accepted saying that after the first 6 months you start talking to the trees, and after 12 months, the trees start talking back. The facilities on the camp and the open hospitality afforded by the local population did much to relieve this condition, but in the case of more sensitive souls, the relatively luxurious living induced a state of semi-guilt at their own personal safety, while loved ones were often in danger. At every hour before Christmas in 1942, the song White Christmas oozed out over the radio and became almost debilitating as men quietly whistled or hummed the tune to themselves, unaware of this reflection of their thoughts. For others, the festivities of the season were a real time for enjoying and rejoicing in a style so long banished from the home front scene in the UK. In time, a new drill hall offered other aspects of enterprise in the view of our administrative officer. The floor was treated and marked out for indoor football and basketball, while the adjoining rooms were made suitable for an interdenominational chapel, a library, an education center, and an airman's reading room. Other basic facilities were expanded as cloakrooms for both sexes, and with the provision of a low band platform, this became the center for station dances. We were a loyal host. Some said everything female from 16 to 60 traveled from both far and near, as during the winter months the dance floor was put to good use. D-Day, June 6, 1944, occurred while Hurricane Unit personnel were being given on-the-job training by RAF Mosquito teams. On July 1, 1944, No. 36 Operational Training Unit of the RAF ceased to exist, and No. 8 OTU, Royal Canadian Air Force, took its place. For most of us, marching orders were but days away, and, as if appropriately, the last shots on a roll of color film were of a sunset over Lake Sandy Bottom. On July 20th, a large draft assembled in the drill hall on their last night at Greenwood. All but a very few were under the weather, and one hard-bitten flight sergeant who had kept his feet well under a civilian table since March 1942 was in near tears and general disorder as we shuffled off to a midnight train at Kingston. Within days we were on the New Amsterdam, along with 6,700 assorted Canadian personnel for our second Atlantic crossing. The value of a tour in Canada lay in the education which was gained with an insight to a less class-conscious society, with attitudes which seemed part British, part American, and yet wholly Canadian in style. In autumn, it is still possible to look back to the beauty of a fall whose brilliant colors enchanted the eye all the way to the Atlantic when heading off the southbound runway, and to remember the rustle of dry leaves deep on the sidewalk of small semi-rural towns, and the many pleasant experiences and surroundings where, down the road a piece, usually meant another 10 miles.